Hello everybody! Let's talk about Persona 6 because green is the talk of the day. With Reload mostly in the rearview mirror, hello episode Igus, the conversation in the community is pivoting back to Persona 6, and the anticipation we have as a collective for the next mainline entry in the franchise. I love Persona, and with extremely little information out about Persona 6, legit, it's like borderline nothing. Well, something has to come in to fill the void, and community expectations and wish lists are abound, and let's talk about it for a second, right? I'm going to focus in on one specific element of a wish list that I've seen a lot of people, even myself, hold, but what I'm talking about kind of applies across the board. Should Persona get older? Now, I've talked about this issue before and how I think I wouldn't mind seeing it get older and go to university or college and have a game set in that setting as opposed to high school. And I think it can work in Persona, however, there's something important to note and a conversation that needs to happen. One, how likely is this to even happen to begin with, but also, should it happen? Because at the same time, when we talk about should Persona 6 get older, we're kind of talking about the series pivoting away from one of its core foundational pillars, its identity. The famous Persona games are 3, 4, and 5, and they're all set in high school, and the idea and the identity of Persona is balancing this high school life against this dungeon-crawling RPG adventure. Now, that can take on different forms, facets, aesthetics, tones, moods, etc., but that is the core central pillar of Persona, this balancing act between scheduling your day-to-day life as a high school student against overcoming basically God. And while it may sound simple to some people, myself included, to simply age it up, at the same time, that is kind of essentially asking Persona to forego one of its foundational pillars and to completely revamp it. You can ask for it all you want, and I will, because I think it is an avenue that could be explored in an interesting way in a Persona game. However, at the same time, how realistic or likely is that to even happen? And should Persona 6 be judged because it chooses to stick to its overall identity? And I would argue no. If it goes to college, then I wouldn't personally mind that. And in fact, I would view that as a plus on the whole. But if it chooses to, again, stick to its identity and remain in high school, I'm not gonna view that as a con, because the game chooses to stick to its identity and pre-established formula, because it's a working, winning one. Persona is one of my favorite franchises and favorite series on the whole. It has incredible stories, cast of characters, gameplay loops. I love it all. And while the gaming industry is not foreign to the idea of a game completely changing its overall identity, you can look at games like Yakuza going turn-based or God of War doing, God of War 2018 and Ragnarok things. Halo having its stint, and same with Call of Duty, of being Titanfall clones. These series have done this before, and while Persona necessarily hasn't, you can argue it has. Persona once started as merely a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, but with Persona 3 incorporated the social simulator aspects to the overall game and loop, and they became well known and cherished and loved, and a core, central, pivotal idea of the identity of Persona. Persona's done it before, but again, what are the chances that Persona will do another change alongside that? Or in the same vein? Unlikely in my opinion, because this is the Persona formula, this is what it is. Maybe you grow out of that, maybe you still end up loving the game, maybe you could love it even more if it did something different. That's entirely fine. Having an opinion and a preference is completely natural and normal. However, I think you're doing yourself a personal disservice if you're going to approach Persona 6 with your own unrealistic aspects or wants and desires, and if and when they don't turn into reality, what good is that doing then? Or are you just potentially harming yourself of a great time with Persona 6 because you decided to tack on a bunch of unrealistic wants about a franchise pivoting its direction away from its overall identity? And if it's just a make or break issue with you, fine, you do you, right? But I'm just saying, if your goal is to enjoy Persona 6 because you love Persona, you're only setting yourself up for disappointment by expecting or demanding Persona be something that it, on the whole, isn't. Now, personally, though, Having said all that, I would prefer Persona to move to college. When I first started Persona way back in the day with Persona 5, I was part of that target demographic. But it's been a while since P5 came out. Let alone if you started with P4 Golden way back in the day, or let alone P3. And chances are, you've grown out of the target demographic, but you may still love Persona because it's a genuinely great game. So it's only natural to want the series to essentially mature and age alongside you, so that you can continue enjoying the game with your ever-evolving skill set or just preferences. I think that makes a ton of sense. And whether it's right or wrong to put that as something Persona 6 should ascribe to be is another separate matter. With Persona 3 Reload being the fastest selling game in the franchise, I can't imagine they're going to make a giant change along these lines. I just can't see it happening. It's not like Persona is stagnating or declining. If anything, it's growing. And that's cool. I love Persona. Do I like every business decision that Atlus does? Hell no. Do I love Persona as a franchise? Hell yeah. And there's nothing wrong with nuance. You don't have to like every single aspect of a game or every single business practice that a game has. We try and paint things black and white far too often, in my opinion. And this is exactly what I mean. Would I like Persona 6 to go to a college setting? Yeah, because I think that opens up new opportunities for the game to not try and sugarcoat certain issues or skate around certain things that it had to before. Think King's Game with the alcohol and them just getting essentially drunk on vibes. But if Persona 6 sticks to what it is, and is a dungeon crawler spliced with a social simulator game set in high school, chances are I'm still going to like Persona. And I'm still going to like Persona 6, because Atlus tends to make great games. It's also important to note that we essentially know nothing about Persona 6 other than the color green. And even that's not confirmed, though, like, come on. Like, come on. If you know, you know. So, whatever the hell manifestation Persona 6 ends up becoming, we simply don't know. And I think that's why we have so much idle speculation about what form Persona 6 may end up taking, because, well, in a void and without answers, we just want to think of something. So wild imaginations go on maximum overdrive, thinking and conceptualizing what Persona 6 may end up becoming. But I don't think Atlus on the whole are that unpredictable. I mean, sure, when it comes to the actual story and themes that Persona 6 may end up tackling, we have absolutely no idea. But in terms of gameplay, I think Persona 6 being, well, a Persona game is a pretty safe bet. Chances are it's going to have a new cast of characters, new MC, it's going to be set in a high school, and there's going to be a social simulator spliced with a dungeon crawling game. Like, that is what Persona is nowadays. And I think expecting it to deviate from that is setting yourself up for disappointment. However, I think theory crafting can be fun, which is why I do it. Because I don't go into these theory crafts saying, oh, if Persona 6 isn't this specifically, it's going to be a failure. No, right? Like, let's be real here. But also, when you go from one Persona game to the next, chronologically speaking, you can see where Atlus either loves the mechanic, hates the mechanic, desires some change here or there, or what they think they should iterate on. Especially when it comes to the actual gameplay and progression. Look at the pacing of various social links going from 3 to 4 to 5, the reward structures, dungeon design overall, combat, baton passes from P5 to Royal, then to phases in P3 Reload. Baton passes got infinitely more powerful in Royal, and arguably too powerful, so they take a step back in Reload. Maybe there's a few too many RNG-esque mechanics, or mechanics that feel RNG, so they take a step back or just make them more deterministic in Reload. We go from Tartarus in P3 to smaller, more tight-knit designed dungeons in P4 to dungeons in P5 being, well, actual experiences that aren't just singular hallways interconnected with one another. They become explorable zones with things to discover if you go off the beaten path and whatnot, with puzzles or situations and story moments and beats and whatnot. I think the main reason they didn't completely stick with that design going into Reload because it was a remake of P3. So keep Tartarus roughly what it is, but kind of iterate on it in certain aspects, with new reward structures, or visuals, or just ways to tackle it and whatnot. I think the biggest room for realistic improvement for Persona going into Persona 6 is within the dungeon design itself. I really like what they did with P5. When the dungeons in P3 and P4 just amount to essentially linear corridors spliced together randomly, it gets a little bit dull and uninteresting to me from a level design standpoint. Though heaven is peak, let's be fair here. I like having that variety, I like having those unique situations and moments that can happen in the dungeons like they did in P5 and in Royal. I like using the grappling gun. Is it the most complex thing in the world? No. But variety is the spice of life. And this is where I think realistic theory crafting for Persona 6 can really end up lying, is by assuming the formula is going to stick and saying, okay, going from P3 to 4 to 5 to Royal to Reload, what is the natural evolution or progression that this mechanic or mechanic A, B, C, or D can undergo, judging by what seemingly Atlus is aiming for? Or what lesson will they likely take away from the latest entry, this now being Royal and Reload? Chances are there's probably going to be a mechanic like Showtime or Theurgy, and I think it'll be more in line with what Theurgy ended up being in Reload, because I think it's really fun in Reload. I love that deterministic aspect to it, though that may just be personal preference. I think dungeon design will be more akin to P5, because I think it's more interesting in P5, and I think that's the common consensus as well, though I have no actual analytics to back that up. I imagine main character's social link / confidant pacing will be more aligned with P5 Royal, because I can't imagine too many people were thrilled about having to wait till like January for Aika's social link. I would love to see those little events that popped up in Reload that kind of acted as substitutes for full-blown social links for characters like Junpei, Akihiko, and whatnot, but I would love to see actual social links / confidants for characters in P6 alongside having those cool moments. The more character moments, the better, in my opinion. That's where Persona thrives in terms of character development and pacing. Persona 6 is going to be extremely interesting to follow. It will be. There's a lot of wants and wishes in the community right now, and I think it just stems from the fact that a lot of us just love Persona. And when you love something this much, you become excited for what happens next, or what comes next. So here's where you come in, and here's where I want your feedback. Whether it's gameplay, social link, mechanics, story, character-wise, whatever. Name an aspect of Persona that you want to see changed. Whether it's realist, I want to. Your realistic wants and desire for Persona 6, and your most far out there, if they gave you full creative control, what would you do? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions, whether it's on the game on the whole, or just a specific design change. Let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.